Another episode. Here we go. This is the final episode before we jump into annual enrollment officially for 2026. We've got basically on October 1st, we got pre-sales kicking off. And basically, we're still finding out information from a lot of the carriers as far as which plans are non-commissionable, networks, all sorts of things. Nothing like waiting till the 11th hour, 59th minute. Yeah. 59th second.
Yeah, I would just want to add on to that. I mean, look, from all of our listeners out there, we have a good chunk that are our own agents and distribution, everybody else. We've been certainly later to the game with some of our partners this year as far as, strategy, their book of business, where to focus their efforts. If we have any support of any sort of marketing dollars or support initiatives and things out there, things are just later this year. I think that's not necessarily just us. It's all probably orgs out there. So if you're one of those producers out there also thinking man, my agency sucks, I haven't gotten X or Y or Z answers, it's kind of an industry-wide thing. I mean, we literally just got a call even last week on Friday, Thursday, from even UHC. It was like, hey, just kidding, this state, Washington, we're sending out another amendment to your, to your contract because of the, anyways, I won't go into it. But
recently, Humana had another round of updates
to their PPP plan.
Yep. Cigna had another round of last minute non-commissionable and suppressed stuff. Oh, just kidding. Add these ones too.
Yeah. So those are just three carriers we just named that had some, last minute changes. As we're kind of trying to dial in our budgets, look, you all should be doing from a top line. We're trying to look at, what does our growth look like for this next year? Where's the business going to come from whom? Okay, where do we put our marketing dollars and our budgets for, whether it be, compliant lead generation, whether it be supporting local agencies there? Deploying that strategy has just been really brutal this year. So it's been a shit show. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it's we have some tactical tips that we wanted to get into the latter half of the episode and talk about AEP, and then talk a little bit about the future of where we think everything's going. But there's a couple, it almost feels like I've just not given up, but just kind of stopped paying attention to all the new, salacious news of the day about the industry, and just kind of it is what it is. It's not great right now. It's difficult. We're going to just focus on how do we win and stop dwelling on all of the negative news and all the challenges that are happening in the industry. And we're just going to roll up our sleeves and go to work.
Yeah. And before we maybe get into the meat of the episode too, which we will, it feels like the end of my kickoff, kind of my closing remarks that I did and talking about the insurance industry in general. And yeah, we're going through turbulent times, but this is still, just that tried, true, tested industry and way to become a millionaire and make money is in insurance. And, everything we'll get into, the way that we teach agents and agencies is be really, really good at what you do. And, the money will come later. Don't be focused on making money. Be focused on being really good at your craft, and that works itself out on the back end. So should we go through a couple of our news articles first before we really dive in?
Yeah. So my first one was one I think that came out on the 26th, and it was from a newsletter or a news release from CMS's newsroom, and the title is Medicare Advantage and Medicare prescription drug plans expected to remain stable in 2026. And I was like, who wrote this article? Talk about a
glass half full.
Glass half full for sure. I think it's called spin in the media world, and Dr. Oz came, and I'm either going, this is either just them putting out some positive tone out into the marketplace to quell some of the chaos. But some of the statistics that they touted, I guess I would say, I would challenge them a little bit, but the general consensus is that it seems like CMS is trying to portray that there's a much rosier outlook right now for Medicare Advantage and PDPs than the brokers and the distribution and the carriers seem to think there are.
Yeah, and I would add to that too, because we also run and we have some Facebook groups that, I moderate from consumers out there where, it's almost like a forum where these consumers are getting on, they're asking questions, they're trying to understand their plans, and it has been upheaval because, as we know, ANOCs are starting to hit, those annual notices of change, and all these consumers are starting to get their PDP drug plan that was $12 or $20 a month, and now it's $62 or whatever that may be. And so they're losing their minds and saying, this is a 300% increase. And not only did it go from $20 to $62, but now my deductible is higher and X and Y and Z. So, I mean, they can paint the picture that it's rosy, but the consumer on the other end is not.
Yeah. There's a couple things in here that it talks about, and they're saying that overall CMS expects their MA enrollment to drop by about 900,000 lives for 2026. And
it's huge.
That's not an insignificant number, right? And so where do those, what Dan and I were talking about is, where do those people go? There's only two places they can go, which is right back to original Medicare, right? Or a supplement. And the sup industry is dealing with its own challenges. And it's one of the things that we've been talking to a lot of the consumers and a lot of our agents and leadership lately is, hey, look, if sups were this great panacea, or they were a great antidote or solution for all the turmoil that's going on in Medicare, specifically on the pain on the Advantage Plan side, that would be a great solution for us, right? We'd love to be able to just parlay or transition people over into supplements, but they're dealing with their own challenges, right? Costs are going through the roof. A lot of these states are being forced with these SEPs, these election periods, to take membership with guaranteed issue. And then a lot of other states are going birthday rule and having to accept people that they would normally be able to deny.
Underwrite. Well, they'd be able to underwrite, yeah, but they...
And so premiums are just going through the roof there. The other thing that I take a little bit of issue with in this article, it basically touts how the average drug plan is going down a few bucks a month from last year. And I'm like, I don't know where you're getting these numbers in math, but not by my napkin math. I'm not seeing that, right? And the other thing that I wanted to mention was they tout that 99% of the Medicare population will still have access to Advantage plans. And I'm going, well, I don't know what we're considering an active Advantage plan, but the other thing is we know entire states that are losing and rural counties that are losing Advantage plans entirely. And then even if they are around, most of those plans that are, I guess, technically filed are going to be suppressed or non-commissionable. Right. So either that's the carrier signaling, well, I guess we'll keep the plan around, but we're definitely not in a healthy financial situation to take on more of this membership. And if you can find this plan, good luck. I guess you can stumble your way to MedicarePlanFinder.com and stumble your way through an enrollment and choose a plan for yourself without the help of a broker because it's non-commissionable. And then there's a whole host of other issues affecting these small and regional carriers I think you wanted to talk about.
Yep.
So
before we go on there, I think it's important to bring up that we've said a few times that the people that are most impacted by this are people in rural America, right? These are not people living in a metro. Like if you're in these big metro areas, you have 3, 4, 5, 10 different carriers and up to 50, 70, 80 different plan options to choose from. So if one carrier is negatively impacted, you still have you have broad choices. But when you're in rural America, you maybe only have one carrier or two, and you have very limited choices. So with them really pulling out of some of these markets, experiencing these financial issues, and most of it's to do with risk, right? But they're leaving these areas. These rural Americans are the ones who are mostly going to have these issues and trying to find coverage. So rural America is mostly impacted by this. And then the other thing, of course, are PPO plans, right? We keep going back to, look, there's a higher cost for an MA company to administer and run a PPO plan. They have less profit margin than if they run an HMO, period. Flat, I don't care who you are, that's how it is. So in a restricted funding environment, you're seeing the deletion or restriction of a lot of these PPO plans in these areas going really right back to HMO. Even carriers doing the move where they say, hey, we're almost going to have the exact same plan, like almost like a mirror, where it's the same thing. We're pulling out of the market and doing a SAR with a PPO, and we're just reintroducing a new plan that's an HMO. We're still around. So you're seeing a lot of that. So just be aware of that environment. And look, this is more just educational and informational for you listeners so that you can help, your clients and try to steer them into the right coverage option. So be aware of that.
Yeah. And I think that, some of the statistics that are touted in this article seem to be a little suspect in painting the overall picture much rosier than it seems to be.
Totally.
And I don't really know what the benefit of doing that is. And like you said, rural, a lot of you, we're based in the West. We're based out of Utah is where we're headquartered. And a lot of people, I think if you're back East, you don't really have a very great idea of what rural really is, because out here in the West in some of these areas like Idaho and Wyoming, Montana, Nevada, it can be miles and miles and miles from person to person, and access to a hospital even in general is hard. And then losing access to some of these plans, these advantage plans, these good insurances that some of these beneficiaries have wanted and needed for years and years and years, it's just a big blow, especially to a lot of our agents and beneficiaries out here in the West.
Well, and I think that there was a lot of years put forth with, there's a whole nother segment of the business with the FQHCs and trying to expand out coverage options into these rural areas, and to kind of have a lot of that progress have been created. And obviously some of that was carriers were able to do that with higher funding environments and more reimbursement dollars to be able to insure those higher risk, people in rural America. But to see kind of that progress that took a lot of years be wiped away, that's a blow.
Again, yeah. And I mean, I think we've been fairly critical of CMS under, two sides of the house or two administrations, where you go, your intended or unintended consequences aren't necessarily matching what your stated goals are or what your stated issues you're trying to correct are, because things are at odds with each other, right? You've got HHS that I think is doing a really great job on a lot of aspects, come out and say, oh, hey, we're introducing extra funding for rural communities. We've got these grants and these billions of dollars going to these rural hospitals, and we're trying to eliminate prior authorizations and work some of those things down. And then on the other hand, you go, well, and now all these seniors in rural communities are losing access to advantage plans and have less insurance options, and we're reinstituting a lot more cost control. Like, if we're being realistic, HMOs do have more access and cost controlling mechanisms,
cost containment measures,
like prior auths and like referrals that people generally don't like as much, which is why PPOs had become so popular. So it's just interesting to me that we have this dichotomy of like, here's our stated goals and here are some of the issues that we're emphasizing on correcting, and yet here's the end result of some of these funding decisions and some of the way that it's actually playing out in real time.
Yeah, and listen, for those, I'm not over here being like, woe is me. I'm not over here, down here at Agent Boost and saying, oh, this isn't fair. I've learned that things in life is just not fair. But, we have agents and agency partners that are like, well, what do I offer my clients? Because I have 700 people in this state who are all going SAR, where they're not going to have coverage. And the only thing I have to offer them is a SUP. And I think about 150 or 200 of my clients can afford to pay the SUP premiums and a PDP, because, obviously premiums are a lot higher these days than they've been in the past. And I basically have 400 to 500 of my clients that are basically going to go just original Medicare, and maybe they can afford a PDP. So, I mean, those are some of just scenarios that we've seen with some of our agents and agencies that look to be pretty ugly, that's kind of starting to unfold. So.
Yeah. And either way, look, this is the situation that we're in. Good agents are going to find a way to continue to grow, to service their books of business. They're going to find a way to, help their clients and be creative and have access to different lines of business and different products that may be able to help them get the coverage they need. And then when things correct a little bit and brighter days are ahead, we'll be able to help them even further.
The only other thing that before we move on from, CMS, that I don't know if we talked about it on the last episode is, apparently they want to push because there have been voices out there saying, hey, if there's all these plans that are suppressed or non-commissionable, who's going to do the work? Mm-hmm. Who's going to enroll and give guidance to people and help enroll them on the plan? And the thought from, at least it seems from CMS, has been, well, they can go on Medicare Plan Finder, and they can go on Plan Finder and choose a plan and enroll through Medicare Plan Finder. Fine. If the agent's not going to get paid to do that, then they can go directly and self-serve on the plan website. And now they create an SEP that where if a consumer goes and does an enrollment into a plan directly on Medicare Plan Finder, and then screws up, like their doctor's not in network or some other issue, then they created an SEP, which will allow that consumer to change their plan. And I think I understand what they were trying to do with that, but I think the logic is completely flawed. And there's not that many people who really actually just go directly to Medicare Plan Finder and enroll and sign up on their own without the use of an agent. Because I can even tell you, all the FMOs and agencies and all the big e-telebrokers and everybody out there, look, the golden goose idea that we've all had is let's advertise, let's push a consumer to a site where they can start answering questions, and let's kind of refine that lead and make it into a better quality lead or prospect. And let's just get them to go through the whole enrollment process on their own, where we don't have to pay an agent for a commission or fee. But if you talk to any of the e-telebrokers, a very, very, very small percentage of their enrollments actually happen where it's not guided through an agent journey. Mm-hmm. Very few percent.
Yep.
So the whole point is, if these third-party entities who have really deep pockets, who have spent a lot of money in technology, who have tried to get consumers to do a self-enrollment, haven't been able to achieve that by large numbers, then the government's not going to be able to do it either. And that's not going to be the solution for, all these people who are wanting an agent to provide services and are saying, sorry, I can't help you. I literally can't even get paid a fee to drive out there and perform these services or help you on the phone for an hour. So I think it's flawed. I just wanted to bring that up before we really, moved on from it. So
yeah, I think you wanted to mention one more kind of
and
thing that was going on in the industry before we kind of talked about AEP tactics.
Yeah, it was actually like, in credit to, it was Becker's, I don't know, like, we're geeks. We read up on a lot, different articles, different sites. I subscribe to a lot of things. I attend webinars. And Becker's, I'll like read their articles. They send out emails once or twice a week, but one that caught my eye was about regionals. And we've been talking about the industry and just pricing pressures and reimbursement rates and regulatory. We've been talking about a lot for 2 years. But regionals and smaller carriers are more impacted by it, right? Because they don't have the scale that national carriers have. And there was an article that they put out where they've been doing recent studies with all these regional and smaller carriers in the MA space. And they found that over 70% of these MA carriers were operating at a loss in 2024. So we're talking, not only are they not making money, they are literally, by every day that they are open for business, taking in more customers, more consumers, more members, they just exacerbate that because they're operating at a loss. Okay. So 70%, that number is staggering. And we're talking, they surveyed like over 100 of these regional carriers. It wasn't like some sample set where they talked to 2 or 3 regionals. It was over 100. So you think about how staggering that is. They're not making money. And in fact, to make it worse, they went on to say that most of these companies only have financial runway for about 2 years or less than 2 years before it would require government intervention, because of their insolvency issues. So you think about like the Sonder situation that played out in Georgia, some of these others. So there's a lot of these regional plans that I fear are still submitting bids right now to try to be aggressive and get membership and compete. And they're just going to exacerbate their issue with they're already not profitable and they're going to go take on more membership and exacerbate this, and they're already not profitable.
Yeah.
And it called out specifically a lot of the Blues and these other smaller ones and saying, hey, people are really quickly within the next year going to have to really decide about just consolidation and maybe mergers and acquisitions and grouping up with firms that are better capitalized, larger, bigger national firms, or they're just going to have to close their doors. So I just wanted to put that out there. I think it's important. It's of note to be conscientious about where you're placing business right now, because those financial pressures are worse for them. And even the fact that they rely a lot on Medicaid business, a lot of these orgs, with the big, beautiful bill, that's also one of those things, is it's getting more people off of Medicaid, and that disproportionately impacts some of these blues and some of these smaller regionals. So just, again, be conscientious. That's the environment we're in. There's probably going to be more noise. You've seen like these bigger carriers making splashes and waves and doing things that are maybe unpopular. At the same time, you're going to see these regionals continue to do this over the next year or two. I am predicting. My crystal ball tells me, what's the 8 ball we used to have as kids?
The magic 8 ball.
Yeah, the magic 8 ball.
That we teased Dad that said he wouldn't let us play with it when we were kids.
Yeah, because it was like a Ouija.
Yeah, because he thought it was like evil.
Yeah, does not look good. My magic 8 ball is telling me it does not look good.
Yeah, so I think that we're already seeing that, right? We've already seen it all last year, all this year. A lot of those regional carriers, the Blues especially. I've had a saying about the Blues. Don't I won't say it, but if it's blue, it's hard to trust, right? It's hard to trust that they're going to continue to pay commissions. I mean, even the marquee Blues that have been agent favorites across the country, these smaller regional carriers have really burned it all down as far as commissionable. Not just the Blues, but other regionals are tapping out, saying they're not paying commissions at all, or they're just getting out of the Medicare Advantage space. And it's interesting too. I wonder how the scorekeeping will go when things kind of correct and funding gets a little bit better and profitability's better, and a lot of these orgs decide they want to get back into the space in years down the road. I wonder how difficult it'll be for them, or if there'll just kind of be a blanket amnesty for all these carriers for
forgiveness.
This time. Yeah, because we always say on here, the North remembers, a Game of Thrones reference, but I think now every carrier basically is like, yeah, well, we all have warts and things that you don't like, and we all did things that agents and distribution wasn't happy with. So
we all keep scores though, and there's a running tab.
It's like who did me the worst, who did me the dirtiest? That's who I'm going to hold the grudge against.
It's pretty true. So don't be the worst.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, we've really spent a lot of time covering a lot of the challenges in the industry, and I do a weekly sales meeting and try to start the week with some motivational content. And today we basically just talked about how the market and in life, you're always going to be better compensated for the amount of problems that you're able to solve and the amount of skills that you're able to add, the amount of people that you're able to help. The easier your job or what you ever do, the least compensated you're ever going to be for it. Mm-hmm. And that's very, very true for insurance agents, right? And I've been seeing agents basically have been kind of systematically tapping out or saying they want to leave the industry or leaving the industry in droves over the past year and a half. And I just keep reminding agents that, hey, when it gets hard, when it gets tough, it's going to reward those who are able to put in that hard work consistently over time. And I think now more so than ever, the agents who are able to make it through this last kind of really difficult era in the Medicare and ACA space are going to be rewarded with a lot of good times in the future.
Yeah, and I actually compare the two industries that I compare a lot one to another are insurance and real estate. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to a group of agents just last week and saying, hey, look at even real estate. Look at the housing bubble and look at 2008. And when you were like a real estate agent who all you were doing was selling to, I'll be your listing agent. Yep, 3% commission, selling or buying. And all you're doing is finding new prospective new homeowners and buy. Like those people, their business died. But I know people who made bank even when real estate was tough because they just pivoted and they were more strategic and they worked with investors. And then they started when, regular Joe Blow people couldn't afford like a higher interest rate, they were working with institutions or investors, and they were selling just as much or more even during hard times. in the real estate industry. They just adapted their business to the environment, right? And we talk about that in insurance being the same thing, that yes, to your point, it gets harder, but there's been more millionaires created from, and I know people are going to jump on and be like, crypto now. Okay, data's still out on crypto. Yeah. It's new, all right, in the last couple of years. But historically, you look at real estate and insurance, and those are the industries that are pumping out lots of millionaires. You can make a lot of money doing it. And I always tell people, do it by helping and serving people. And when you have that servant mindset, and you're there to help your customer and that consumer, and you're helping to navigate, and you are just set on becoming the best at it, that money will come. But you can't have that be the focal point. Otherwise, people make short-sighted decisions. That's when they have questionable ethics. That's when they do bad things that only benefit them. You have to have that longevity and mindset in mind. And if you do that, and I think we're going to get into some of the specifics, like you will be able to not only just weather the current environment, but like long-term be able to build a sustainable practice and a sustainable business.
Yeah, I think that, I look at any industry that you look at always faces some sort of disruption, some sort of threat, some sort of evolution. And you can pick any industry out there, and people that have good, long, successful careers and make a lot of money, they're able to adapt and be resilient.
Yeah, look, you talk about people, in like energy, in solar cells, in solar panels.
That's exactly where I'm going.
And subsidies go away. And I talk to friends that I know in HVAC, and they're going like, hey, well, this big PE group just did a capital raise, and they bought up all these people, and now I can't compete because my unit prices are higher than theirs. Like, it's not green. Like, guys, there's problems and challenges in every industry. It's not just us.
Yep.
So
there's like you said, there's a lot of industries that I have friends in that are currently being disrupted, even more so than what's happening in the health insurance space. And, friends in solar, right? Their subsidies are all expiring. The economics are all backwards. You talked about the housing crisis collapse. Look at realtors. They just had a ruling against commissions, and they've kind of had to reinvent themselves and the realtor industry over the past couple of years. I mentioned to the sales teams this morning, you have AI and tech always disrupting different industries at times. And so you have to basically be resilient. And I've listed out a bunch of soft skills that no matter what happens or what industry you're in, if you're able to master these soft skills, you're going to be able to be compensated very well over time. And I look at even with like Medicare, and I think a lot of agents that we work with and that we encounter across the country have been kind of set in their ways, and they're almost a little bit resentful right now, and they're throwing a tantrum about the industry changing. And I look at it and go, we're kind of in like what I am considering the third era of Medicare Advantage. It's just another evolution. I mean,
and while they're throwing a tantrum, they're becoming antiquated.
Correct. And Dan and I got in the industry, back when we joke and say, we had to walk uphill both ways in the snow with gunny sacks wrapped around our feet, and we drove around the entire states spending money on mailers and mailing out to people and then calling them and meeting them in their homes and doing meetings at the Golden Corral and paying for dinners and people to show up and lick their plates. And there was, as that always changed from doing it, in groups and face to face, we kind of moved into this like more technological evolution where then
telecom, we're on the front end of it.
Yeah. Telecom and call centers started rising, and technology's been able to really move in, and a lot of dollars as Medicare Advantage really became the way to make a lot of money. Big institutional money moved in over the past decade, and we made it through that too. And now we're in this like third phase of kind of, stabilization and course correcting a lot of things, but it doesn't really matter whether you're in this industry or something else. You always have to be evolving, and you always have to be, have resilience, or you're going to be washed out of the industry at some point in time.
Yeah. And the other thing we talk about frequently, like we talk about it in sales meetings, we talk about it with trainings, is I think that we have, as far as distribution and sales go, thirds. I always talk about the thirds. You have 1/3 of the agents who are legacy agents. They're people who have been around for a long time. They've been around for 10, 15 years, a long period of time. and they've been selling, and they've seen a lot of changes and iterations. They've been through the ups and downs, and the inception of the scope of appointment, the going away from it, the recorded phone calls, the call centers. They've lived through a lot. And then you have another third of the agents who've just basically started selling over the last 5 years, and they don't know any different. They hopped on the wagon selling during COVID years where everything was sexy benefits, and you weren't even talking about insurance much. You were talking about grocery cards and flex cards and, dental and all the other goodies and benefits, everything except for the core thing of what insurance is and how to access your plan and how to use your plan. And anyways, so there's those agents who don't know any different. And then you have the other third of agents who are brand new, who are getting in and kind of going like, I don't know any different. This is all that I know. So you have kind of like those thirds of agent types too, and their perspective and view and how they're approaching business and is completely different from agent to agent.
Yeah. And I want to give some of these, let's call them legacy agents. And Dan and I lament all the time about how do we just get our good agents that have been in the business for a long time to keep working, to keep being good agents. And, there's some of them, I want to kick them in the butt a little bit and go, you guys can't just hang it up and not evolve, because they get to a lot of these agents get to a point where they feel entitled because in the past they've done a lot of good work and they have a book of business of a couple hundred or a few hundred or 1,000 clients, and they make good money. And then they just feel like they can neglect their business, or that they can kind of check out. And it's like, dude, you're not retired, and you're not getting compensated residuals from these insurance carriers to not ever work again, right? Like that's not the purpose of that. In fact, it's the opposite. It's to continue to pay you to offer value to those clients, and you've got to continue to evolve. And time again, Dan and I come across agents or that have basically took their foot off the gas for too long and let their business neglect. And then it's almost like they have to start over in the industry and they have to relearn it again. And that's exhausting versus just like staying engaged year round and, staying up to date with the changes and continuing to offer value.
Yeah. And I would say that we have those agents that is the mindset, right? Where, and I'm not being critical. It's just understanding human psychology and that human nature. I do completely get it. And every once in a while I have to catch myself too. Like when I slip into these mental states where I feel like entitled, like, I've busted my ass for X or Y or Z. I've earned it. And it's like, no, but you were compensated in those years when you did that though. You know what I mean? And so the mentality is, hey, I've written 700 policies for that insurance company and they're cutting off this, or they're changing the rules, or they're, not allowing me to do community meetings anymore, or they're not paying for my Walmart store, or they're not giving me leads anymore, or they're not giving me co-op, whatever it may be, the rules of the game have changed, and the agents, the cheese has moved, and the agents are upset about it, and we completely understand that. But, it is very much a what have you done lately for me industry, where you constantly have to be producing. And, you cannot just take your foot off the gas and sit on your block of business, right? And the other thing that I think we are trying to help agents understand is some agents, and if this is you out there, again, we're not being critical, but we have a big portion of agents that we've observed throughout the country who have had very consistent like their local marketplace has been very consistent for a period of, call it 5 or 10 years, where they've been able to very sustainably write 50, 100, 300, whatever that volume of business is every year for a number of years and build a very large practice or book of business. And we have been shouting from the rooftops for years that as you scale that you need to bring in office staff, that you need to build a business, you need to build up more resources within that with all that revenue to take care and service your members. And now we're seeing like this big cliff where finally there's massive disruption in their local marketplace, and they may have 1,500, 1,800, sometimes 3,000 members I've heard of, and they're highly impacted this AEP, and they have not invested into infrastructure into their agency or their book of business, and now they have no means or way to try to service and take care of hundreds or thousands of clients.
Yeah, and just they run out of there's not enough time to help all those people. And it's hard to wrap your arms around that when you don't have that staff to help, or you're not diverse. And, Dan and I have coached agents repeatedly over years, kind of don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't be overly indexed with one carrier in one area, because you never know what's going to happen. And we've just seen it happen so many times recently, where these agents that have had good partnerships with these carriers, they're only partners as long as things are good, right? But when the economics change, they're the first to, the partnerships go out the window, and they don't really care what happens to that long time relationship, because they've got to, they got to make their quarterly earnings. They've got to have focus on shareholders or internal share prices that they need to work on.
That, and just how often you hear of agents who have built relations with, well, I'm not going to get screwed because I'm friends with so-and-so and we go to church together, or I've known them for 10 years, so they got my back and I'm safe. But then,
they give me leads. They help me.
Yeah, things happen, and maybe they lose their job. Maybe they get a promotion. They move somewhere. Whatever happens, and suddenly that one relationship that was built very much impacts their business, and they have no way to recover from it because they've just gotten too complacent for too long. So anyways, I don't want to dwell on negative things. I think more than anything, you were going to focus, Mike, on some of the positive tactical things for AEP and what agents probably should be doing to focus on it.
Yeah, I'll transition to that, but I just, your ability to make money and be compensated well directly correlates with your ability to do hard things consistently over time. And the more that you can do that, the more value you're going to add to the marketplace, and the more you're going to be rewarded. And then at every level you grow as an agent or business, the more problems you're able to solve, the more you're able to scale, the more you're going to be rewarded. And that's one thing that, Dan and I even focus on right now, where we're at in the business, is yes, at the level we're at the problems that we're dealing with, and the scale and the stress and the is just as hard or harder proportionately to where you're at, and it never changes, right? So you just have to just accept that and be happy and find that positivity and that reward and that growth and that fulfillment in solving those things that you're doing. But we wanted to talk a little bit about, technically about some of the things that we coach agents to do. And so,
while you're transitioning there, I would say there's a lot of truth to that, because regardless of where you're at in your journey as a business owner, you have to be prepared for that. Meaning that I meet a lot of agency owners that never get out of a certain rung that they're in, like a certain echelon or a tier that they're at. Because what happens is when you're an agent and you're selling like 3 companies, you're going to have problems that you have to navigate, complexities. Then you start adding another state, you add more carriers, then you maybe add a new line of business. Maybe you start to become a GA and you recruit agents, and now you got to service your own book of business and deal with all this. Now you're training other people. Now, you look at that and compound to where you're right. It's more money, more problems. And the bigger you get, the more problems you have and the more that you have to solve. And some people just hit to some level where they're just, that's either they've peaked, either they've hit that level to where, one, they just don't have the skills necessary to ever get out of that level to the next level, or 2, they don't have the motivation or the drive or the ambition to ever surpass the level. They are where they are because of who they are as a person.
Yep.
Right?
And while I talk about these things tactically, one of the things I love about Dan as my brother, and I don't know where we got it from necessarily, but I have this growth mindset where I always want to get better, and I'm never satisfied, right? And no matter what level we get to in the business or I get to my life, I just readjust my goals and my expectations, and I want to continue to learn. I want to continue to level up and get better. And I think that's one of the reasons why, Dan's been able to lead a company that far surpassed a lot of others, and we've been able to ascend to that level, is because you're always looking at just that next level above you and not being satisfied and being complacent. And that's really, complacency is one of the things that I feel like holds most agents back. And I always tell people that my agents will work to the level of their comfort. And usually they'll stop working, they'll feel comfortable way sooner than they initially thought. And that's why when I coach on AEP, one of the things that I love about this industry that attracted me to it many, many years ago was the fact that you could make a lot of money in a short period of time by helping people. And it really is a unique industry. And we have friends that do door to door. They'll go out for the summer. They'll go out for 4 months, live in a crappy area, in a crappy apartment.
Pest control.
Go knock doors 10 hours, 12 hours a day, selling security, pest control, solar, whatever. And they come back, and if they're successful, they make a good amount of money. And I'm like, yeah, but you could have done that here with annual enrollment. You could stay where you live, or you could make just as much money in just a shorter period of time. And guess what? It's residual, you know? And so I want everybody to understand that AEP and OE for ACA, and then even now open enrollment period, are uniquely to this industry. They're unique to this industry, and the opportunity that you can make a lot of money by doing an altruistic thing and helping people in a short period of time. And I tell agents, I've sold a lot of crap in my life. I've sold everything from, retail microtransactions to vacuums door to door to cable door to door to homes as a realtor. And if I don't believe in the product,
I did lawn, True Green,
Dan did lawn, True Green,
fertilizer, Comcast. Yeah,
we sold it, right? I used to sell fireworks door to door when I was a little kid in Rocks. But if I believe in something, I can sell it. If I don't, if I have a broken mindset about it, I suck. I can't convince anybody because I don't feel good about it. But Medicare, and with the plans that we provide for these people, you're helping people with their health and wealth, and it's a noble profession. And you're able to make something complicated easy to understand for them. And if you can do so enough times, you're able to build a really good income and a really good business. And so I always like to have agents start out with their why for AEP or their goals. And, I tell agents, what the AEP is an opportunity unlike anything else, where you can flip your situation financially. Even if you're an employee in some of these sales environments and you work extra hard, I know nobody likes being behind on their bills. Nobody likes living paycheck to paycheck. Nobody likes not being able to have the life they think they deserve. And AEP is a vehicle where you can, if you do well and you execute and you put in extra time and effort, you can make more money in a short period of time and get you to that next level financially every year over year. And I know that, you and I have both done that throughout the course of our lives and been able to use that money to propel us each year and make progress. And so I always ask for, what is your goal for AEP? And the last year that I sold actively, I think was 4 years ago, and I wanted to pay for the down payment for my house. And I was still doing my position of what I was doing here, but I wanted to go make enough money to where I didn't have to sell my house or get into my savings. I could just make enough money during AEP. So I had that goal. I printed off my vision board, like my design of my house that I wanted. I knew how much money I needed to make. I wrote it down, like I knew exactly how many dollars to the exact dollar I needed for this down payment. And then I broke it down of how many sales I needed to get that, right? Like how many enrollments I needed to do. And I think most people don't do that. They just kind of show up for AEP and their job as an agent or whatever it is they're doing, and they just, whatever happens to them happens, right? Whatever.
They're hopeful.
They're hopeful. Whatever comes their way that day is what happens. But what I would do is, specifically, I needed about 185 enrollments at AEP at what I was averaging to make this amount of down payment. And I broke it down over the 10 weeks. Every single day, I knew exactly how many enrollments I need to have. And then what I would do is I would hold myself accountable to that. Like, the start of AEP, I had some pre-enrollments that were ready to go, and I built a tracker where every single day I knew my run rate.
Compliant pre-enrollments. I built my run rate, right? So what I would do is I would hold myself accountable. And if I was on track or above and there's something came up, there was a Thanksgiving party or Christmas party or whatever I wanted to go to, looking at the Christmas lights, whatever, then I would let myself go. If I was behind, I would stay. I would work extra time. I would put in time on Saturdays and skip it because I was staying on track, okay? A lot of people think that during annual enrollment, people are just going to beat your doors down or somehow track you or somehow find you, and without any sort of extra skill or effort or plan, you're going to make this extra amount of money. And that's just simply not the case. You have to put in the extra time when the opportunity is there to maximize it, right? And if you're not with a good coach or upline or company that can show you how to do this very specifically, you don't have a plan,
then a lot of agents are dead in the water before AEP even starts. And one of the things that we always notice is we bring on a lot of agents right when annual enrollment starts, because a lot of agents realize I'm not in the system or the ecosystem. I'm not set up for success. I don't have a plan. I don't know what I should be doing. Whatever I'm doing isn't working out for me or what I expected. So it's actually a really good time for us to bring on agents. But you have to have a plan. Hold yourself accountable, right? And stay on track with your goals, because what a lot of I can show like a basic version of what I had done, but I built a tracker every day that would just hold me accountable.
Before you continue on, a couple of the elements that I want people to understand too is we even build into our band, like essentially from company-wide, when we have our forecast for AEP, we have our overall forecast, and we have it literally broken down on ACA for OE, but then we have a big top line number, and then it's broken down per carrier even, and same thing on Medicare. We have our top line number, and then it's broken down per carrier, and we have our revenue goals, we have our sales goals, everything. And that is broken down to the man, so to speak, per NPN and per selling agent that we have. Like Mike goes as president of sales to every single NPN across our whole entire org and assigns them a number. Now, for example, if we have an NPN that hasn't written all for the last 9 months, chances are they're probably not going to write it all during AEP, right? But we have to look at how many selling agents we have and break our goals across those selling agents and forecast everything out. The other thing that we have to do is you have to take a look at your effectuation rate, or your accretion, because if you're only having 75% or 80% of your policies take effect, then you have to be above your sales number and account for that drop-off rate in your policies that don't go into effect. So just be aware as you're thinking about this and you're going to build a tracker and go through your goals for AEP, if you want to finish at 100, but you know that 20% of your sales aren't going to stick, you need to sell 120, right? Just because you need to be above that. The other thing that I think agents miss the mark on too is the pre-selling period from October 1st to 15th is an absolutely critical time of year where you need to be just as active, or if not more active during that time than you are throughout most of AEP. Because the reality is, if you look at the consumers as a big pie and all those eligibles, every day that goes on from October 15th on, more and more of those consumers have made their plan selection. They've either made the decision to stay on their current plan for next year, or they've changed plans or done whatever, and they've removed themselves from the eligible queue, right?
Yep.
Like they've made their decisions.
They're out of it.
So now your addressable market has become smaller for you to work, and it gets more and more challenging. So again, when you look at run rates, you're probably going to talk about it, but there's like an ebb and a flow where the month of October is massive. You'll kind of have a slowdown a little bit in November, typically. And then you're going to have like the week of Thanksgiving, which is just a bad week. Just that week, your averages per sale are going to be lower. And then you'll have kind of a peak spike at the very end of AEP with all the procrastinators, right?
Yep.
So there's these ebbs and flows to the AEP season. There is that seasonality week to week that you need to account for when you're really running your forecasts. And I'll tell you, we know, and I was impressed that you can probably quote the numbers.
I'm going to quote it. Yeah.
You'll be impressed, but we know when agents are going to hit their AEP goal or not by like October 6th, 17th, 18th. We already know if an agent is going to hit their sales goal.
Yep. Yeah. So two things there to add on. Yes, the accretion, especially during annual enrollment, something you can do tactically. Remember, it's last application wins. And so a lot of agents will submit something on October 15th or early on in AEP, and they don't check in or they don't check on it the whole rest of the AEP, and they show up on their commission. They look on their commission statement in January and go, what the heck, where are all these enrollments? Reminder, guys, there are a lot of agents out there. People are getting bombarded by a lot of information, and they very often make a different plan selection after you've talked to them.
Yep. They go play pickleball with their neighbor and they change
you got
their
on
mind.
that? Okay. What I would do is every Sunday night, I would sit and watch TV when my kids and my wife went to bed, and I would look up all my prior enrollments for that week, and I would check on them to make sure they were still good. And by the end of AEP, I had a lot of people to check on, but I would keep making sure that once I'd already written that enrollment, that I wanted it to go in. And if I saw it fall off, I would check back in with that person. Hey, did someone else, did some telesales agent call you? Did you get, what happened? Did you withdraw this application?
Well, and sometimes it's technical too. It's like, hey, no, I'm still good. Okay, great. I just saw in my portal it wasn't showing up.
Yeah, I miskeyed their MBI or something like that. And so you want to keep the business you write. You want to make sure that you keep it. And usually clients don't care, even if you're following up. They know you're a good agent that checks on their stuff, right? And then to Dan's point about how important pre-AEP is, the 1st through the 14th, because again, you can't take an enrollment, but you can talk benefits. You can essentially pre-tee up, and that's when we coach agents to do a lot of their SAR work, a lot of their agents
current
that need to be current member work. And I will tell you that we know from being a large FMO that you will put in anywhere from 18 to 20% of your overall AEP enrollments will happen by the end of the 3rd business day of AEP. Yep. And so when Dan said we can project out where you're going to land, if an agent comes to me and they say, Mike, I'm going to write 100 enrollments in annual enrollment, and if they haven't entered in 17 to 20 applications by the 4th day of annual enrollment, they're not processed, they are statistically not going to hit their goals. And I can predict out what we'll do as a company for total enrollments within about 8 to 10% by just the first 3 days of AEP. Yep. Because you can extrapolate out the numbers of our historical data, and there's a couple variables there one way or the other, but that's how important those first 3 days are of AEP and really that first week. And what we've seen with working with all these big insurance carriers, they all know where they're at very quickly in the first few days of AEP. Yep. They're getting their reports in and they're going, oh crap, we're taking in a lot more enrollments in these areas that we didn't want or didn't anticipate. That's why you had plans getting suppressed and shut down last year. Or they're going, oh my gosh, we really missed on our benefits. We're not going to have a good year. We're going to get stomped by our competitors in these areas. But that first week is critical.
And within that first week, like the carriers are so sophisticated that they already know where they're at and they're doing financial forecasts based on it. They know where they're going to land at the end of the year. And literally within the first week, they're already starting to plan the next year's benefits 1 week into AEP.
Yeah, and so for the agents, that's when the hard work begins. But for the back end of the house, the FMOs, the carriers, our crazy planning and preparations have all been over the summer and in September. And when that launches, it's basically like the reporting of the results of the efforts that you'd put in. And that's the same.
I always equate it to like running a campaign. Yep. It's kind of like you look at politics, someone runs a campaign, you do all this work, you spend all this money, you get your plan in place, and then it's like, that night where you're sitting around looking at the polling numbers being like, okay, the results are rolling in. And
and we're winning or we're conceding, and so the 15th through the 7th is the hustle, right? That's when the actual really crazy time of AEP. You should be putting in extra time. And one of the things that I've coached all the agents to do is, honestly, October, November, and that first week of December, they're sacred. You should queue up your life. You should go. I've had people doing things like I told them, and they're going to the doctor, they're getting their car checked up, they're taking their last minute trips before the busy season. You should not be going on vacation during October and November in the first week of December. If you're a serious agent, you really shouldn't. That should be before or after when you've done a good job and you can take some time to celebrate, right? But even within that October 1st through the December 7th timeframe, it starts off with a bang, and then as Dan said, it kind of like dips down a little bit and gets a little bit less chaotic into November and around Thanksgiving, and then it really ramps up again that last week of AEP as everybody's thinking about it. And so there are a little bit of ebbs and flows even within that time of AEP. And then I also have a time period that I call overtime, which is December 8th.
Which I misunderstood the other day.
Through the 31st. Which is a lot of times there are SARs, there are service area reductions, there are other SEPs, there are other people that weren't able to get help during that chaotic AEP time, that there may be valid, legitimate SEPs that you can utilize, and there are still people that need help, right? And I just would always coach agents and say, you know, if you didn't hit your goals, but you were close, that's a time to maybe catch up some of that stuff. If you've hit your goals and you crushed it during AEP, do what a lot of agents do, and you can kind of take a little breather and relax during that Christmas season, that holiday season, before you start into OEP again, right? And then OEP starts. And a lot of our agents now, not to confuse, but OE, open enrollment, starts on November 1st for ACA. So a lot of you agents that are doing both, you basically have two really chaotic time periods compressed that overlap a lot with each other. And so you should just be dialed in and focused on those very important time frames to take advantage.
Yep. I would also say one of the things that you talked about, planning vacations and everything else. Look, I'm not telling you how to run your life, the decisions for you to make, within your family and your vacations and everything else. But what I will tell you is that, and like myself and anybody else I know who's been highly successful in this industry has had to make tough choices and sacrifices, right? Meaning that I used to, like growing up, I used to go hunting like during fall. And you asked me, when was the last time I went hunting? It's one of the things that kind of went by the wayside because it wasn't very conducive to being a highly successful agent in the Medicare space, just with the way that enrollment seasons happened, right? Mm-hmm. I had to give that up and sacrifice it, even though I enjoy it. I like being outdoors. The season of it overlapping with when I really had to go time, it didn't work out. There's vacations that I want to take with my family that would be ideal in fall that we just don't do, right? That we would plan a spring instead, or other summer trips and other things like that. And those are sacrifices. I mean, genuinely, I know that those things sound great during fall, and I've just had to make the conscious decision to give up some of those things. And so again, we're not telling you how to live your lives, but if you're a serious agent who is trying to build your business and grind and do what it takes to be successful, sometimes those are the things that you do have to do in order to make it work. And one of my bigger pet peeves that I'll just share with everybody is talking to an agent or an agency who tells me verbally that they are really serious and dedicated to the business. And they say that they're going to do whatever it takes to be successful. And in their mind, whatever it takes is working 20 to 30 hours a week throughout the year. We'll call it January through, we'll call it May.
September, yeah.
And then when June is around, or July or August, when their kids are out of school, then it turns into 10 or 20 hours a week. And then it rolls into September, like prep for AEP. And then it's, they got to take 2 vacations off because they got to prepare for the busy season of work to when they are going to work hard. And I go, that is just not, the behavior is not conducive to what it's actually going to take to be successful, in the environment these days. Like, you have to have a really realistic perspective about the environment that we're in and what's actually going to take, because while you're doing that, the other agent that's out there that's hustling and doing what it does take, they're out there doing the exact opposite. They're working their butt off, they're grinding, they're putting in the hours, and they're going to be the ones that, essentially win the day.
Yep.
So.
Yep. It's a good point. I mean, there is sacrifices. And like I said, AEP, annual enrollment, and even open enrollment, people are not going to track you down and jump out. Some people might, but unless you have a big, robust book of business and you get a lot of referral business, it's just a time where there's more opportunity, and you need to put in extra effort and match that opportunity with the effort, and then you'll be rewarded. It's not going to come naturally, right? And so I just think, guys, annual enrollment something, and open enrollment, OE, these seasonal times where basically it's like an industry where consumers are forced or need to shop every year. There's not anything else really like that in like a forced shopping or sales season.
Your CPA,
kind of like tax season, or maybe if you are Black Friday time for retail and Christmas holiday, but this industry is different, and it can be the mechanism that all you want, but you got to put that extra time and effort into it. Okay. So that's all I got. I mean, I've kind of feel like we've given a lot of AEP pep talks now's the time to just get to work, right? It's by the time you listen to this, it'll probably be AEP, and you should probably just get right to work.
And it's just to kind of wrap up and finalize. We talk about it a lot. Like, I am not the best motivational speaker either. I tell everybody that. I'm really not. Like, our dad growing up, he was like, you were bleeding. He's like, rub some cotton on it. You know what I mean? That's how it was. Just, you are bleeding big time. It's like, yeah, put some cotton on it. You'll be fine. I mean, that's just how I am. So I tend to not be as sympathetic to people because I've had a rough go of trying to figure things out on my own. And I feel like I've not really gotten assistance in the industry in trying to figure it out. It's had to been on my own, a lot of trial and error. Right. And so, but the one thing that I do say is, and we've talked about it a lot, choose your hard. Is it hard to be in your cycle of, not being able to pay your bills and, feeling sorry for yourself and being stressed about money and, getting in arguments with maybe your spouse or significant other, or wanting to have a lifestyle that, you basically can't afford to do? Is that hard? Or do you want to pick your hard where it's, you bust your butt, you work your ass off, you put in extra hours, you create a lifestyle for yourself and your family, you provide valuable service to your clients? That's hard. It's hard to be a really good agent, but like, you get to choose, what your plight is like. You get to choose your hard. And that's what I keep going back to with agents as we get into this sales season.
Yep.
So
perfect. Good luck, guys. Happy AEP and OE.